Hey everyone, welcome back to my Introduction to Python course. Today we're going to be talking about another fun topic called functions and return functions. Functions do allow us as programmers to do three things. It gives us an opportunity to write reusable code. It also gives us a way of performing a particular task within our code, hence the word function. A function gives us a way of doing something within our code. And you can write multiple functions within a Python program. And then lastly, it gives us also the opportunity as programmers to be more efficient. So the less code that you can write, the better, right? So stick around and I'll show you exactly what I mean. So here I've already written down a particular line of code. You can see that I have three print statements and I come in it as a greeting. So you can see I say, hey, how are you? I introduce myself as my name is Blake, and then I ask the person, what is your name? Okay, so let's say I want to print this multiple times. So I can say, I can copy and paste this, and that's all fine and dandy, but of course it takes up time and it takes up space, which is not what we want. So the best way to actually do what I wanted to do, as in, obviously copying and pasting this twice, is I can put this in a function. So I'm going to delete this second bit of information that I don't really need. And then I can say def, and def stands for definition within Python. And then I can say whatever I want to name the function. So let's just call it greeting. And functions are interesting because in order to define a function, we put parentheses and then a colon right afterwards. And then just like with our if statements and our while loops and everything like that, make sure you indent your code. Okay, so I've defined our function, and then the next thing I want to do is I want to actually call our function. So in order for this function, for lack of a better term, to be activated, I need to actually call it. So I've defined it, I need to call it now. So to call our function, we just say greeting. And you can see right here, as I've mentioned before in previous videos, PyCharm allows for suggestions. So if you see that suggestion, you can actually just press tab on your keyboard and it'll fill it out. Okay, now if I run this, there you go. You can see that it prints out what we've already defined in our function. Okay, so now we're doing a great job. We've already printed up our what we want in our function. However, just like I stated before at the beginning of the video, I want to make sure that I print this out multiple times without actually having to waste space and waste time. In order to do that, we can use our function and we can actually copy and paste this. Let's say we want to do it twice. If we do that, it'll run it twice. So you can see right here and also right here. To make this look a bit nicer, I can put a blank print statement right here, and that'll basically print out a blank row between what we want. And there you go. There's that blank print statement. But you can also see that I've printed it twice. I can do this as many times as I want. So if I want to do it, 4 times or 6 times or whatever, I can actually run this, and there you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So that's the nice thing about working with functions. You can do so much more with them. And also, just to continue, I'll give you another example of what we can do. So just using this same example, we can actually put in parameters within our function too. So what exactly do I mean by parameters? A parameter is something like a temporary variable that goes within the definition or the defining of our function. So let's say, for instance, I want to get rid of this and I want to address a particular person. And let's say this person is a friend of ours, right? I can actually put in a parameter right here behind the hey, how are you? And then just say, instead of my name, because we're assuming that this person is our friend and they know our name, let's just say I'm doing great. In order to do that, we need to alter not only the defining of our function, but also the calling of our function. So parameters go right here, and arguments, what's known as arguments, goes within the calling of our function. And I know that doesn't seem to make sense right now. However, the example that I'm going to give hopefully will make sense. So let's say, for instance, I want to address our friend Tim. And I can put a string value in here, and an argument basically is just a value or a variable, which could be a number or a string that we are trying to address and call right back into our function. And this argument is directly related to our parameter. So Tim, you guessed it, is a person's name. Okay, so in order for our print statement to address Tim as a person's name, we could say, and remember in previous videos we did concatenation, so we can say close quote plus, and then call the parameter, and then plus sign again, and then open quotes right here and close quotes right here. So we're saying, hey, name, which is Tim, how are you? So if we run this, there you go. You can see that it says, hey, Tim, how are you? I'm doing great. Okay, so I know that can be, because this is probably your first time seeing this, it can be a little bit tricky. But let me just reiterate what I just did. So remember that whenever we establish our definition of our defining of our function, we had to define it first. Then we put something that we wanted within our function for the function to do. So we're saying that we want our function to print these statements, and then we had to recall or call our function. Now, whenever we add a parameter, we basically have to do the same thing. We're defining our function with a parameter, so that means we also have to call our function with that said parameter, right? So just as this is related to this, greeting is related to greeting within our function, Tim is related to name within our function, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. So we're going to actually do something else with this. Let's say, for instance, if I wanted to change Tim to, let's say a person's name is Haley. The same thing can happen. Hey, Haley, how are you? I'm doing great. You might ask, what is the purpose of that? Why did we have to call this person's name within this function and address it back within the function with said parameter? Well, let's say, for instance, your function has more than just one print statement, or two print statements where you address a person's name. So let's say, for instance, you had this many print statements that contains this person's name, and instead of Haley, I wanted to change it back to Tim. Well, it would take a while, especially the more print statements that you have. Here I just have 5, so it wouldn't take that long. But if you had more than just 10 lines of code that had the person's name that you wanted to change, you would have to go in through each line of code and change Haley to Tim. But here, instead of having to do that, all I would have to do is just change Haley to Tim in our calling of the function, right? So let's say, for instance, if I print this, of course you see it's printed 5 times, but here I'm changing it back to Tim. It's so much easier to just call the function in one line of code and call the person's name within that function in one line of code instead of having to go through each line and change this person's name from Haley to Tim. There's another thing that I wanted to show you that I didn't actually address before. There, instead of having to do this where we do our concatenation, there's actually another way of printing or writing a print statement with the parameter within that print statement. And what is known as is called an F string. So I can say F, and then I can say, instead of this concatenation, I'll actually get rid of these quotes right here, and I can put curly brackets and then do that. And guess what? It'll do the exact same thing. So that's just another way of writing a print statement whenever we want to add, like a specific variable or parameter within that print statement. Okay, another cool thing about functions is that you can actually have more than one parameter. So we already established that the name of the person is a parameter. What if we say, I don't know, temperature. And in this, I want to establish a print statement. And I live in Texas, so it can get pretty hot. So let's just say today it is 100 degrees. Okay, and that's in Fahrenheit. But of course, I don't want to say 100. I want to establish and call in our function just like we did with Haley and name. I want to say an integer, 100, right here. And then I can say, just like we did with name as well, plus temperature. And to save space, I don't want to spell out the entire word. Let's just call it temp plus, and then space again. Okay, so let's see what the output is. I made a mistake. Okay, so to fix this mistake, all I have to do is I just have to change this from, since it's an integer, I have to change this into a string value. So to do that, I'll go ahead and put string str, which stands for string, put it in quotes, or not quotes, I'm sorry, parentheses, and that should fix the mistake. There you go. All right, that's just a little trick that I've learned over the years, changing an integer value or variable into a string. So now it's reading all strings. Today it is 100 degrees. Okay, so that is how and you can add even more. You can add 3 or 4 parameters and then call those values back into the function. So, okay, now let's learn about return statements. Return statements are something that returns a specific value back within a function whenever you recall that function. Okay, so now let's learn about return statements. A return statement is used at the end of a function that returns a specific value once you call that function. So as always, let's give an example so that that can make sense. So what we're going to do, we're not going to use this anymore. So we don't need to delete it. But on your keyboard, you can press Command and then slash, if you're using a Mac, or Control and / if you're using a Windows computer. And let's go ahead and create another function. And we can say that this function is def operation. So we're going to be performing a math operation. So let's say we want our parameters to be A and B. Don't forget to put your colon. And then you could say our operation is math. So let's say C is equal to A plus B. and then I want to return C. Okay, so in order for that return statement to work and us to basically have a value that we want, we can say, let's just say solve or solution is equal to the calling of our function. So we're going to call this, and see, you can see down here that it gives you a suggestion of what you can put down. And that's exactly what we want, except for remember when we call a function, we need to actually have some values for our parameters. So the values that I want is let's say 5 and 7. Okay. And then what I want to do after that is I want to print our solution. So let's go ahead and run that, and I'll show you exactly what's happening as soon as we run it. There you go, 12. So you can kind of guess that what we did was we established a function. This function is called operation. It has two parameters, A and B, which could be any number, right? So this number is A and B, or these numbers are A and B, and I wanted the function to perform an addition operation. So C is equal to A plus B, and then I want it to return that specific value within our function. Then when we call our function, I want it to add our numbers, so our values, which are integer numbers, 5 and 7, and I want it to save within a variable. Then I want to print that variable. So then the output of that print statement is 12. I can change this to whatever I want. So I could say 1 and let's say 4. And then, okay, so the value changes to 5. I could change this to minus. Value is -3. So, that's just a way of, that's basically what the return statement does. It basically gives you the output, or, the solution to whatever we're wanting to do right here within our function. So it could be anything. It could be, instead of just subtraction, it could be multiplication. It could be division. There are more complicated ways of doing this, establishing a function and then doing a return statement. But for now, we'll just keep it simplistic since this is an intro class. And that should be it. So as always, thank you for, watching this video. Make sure you like, you subscribe, you share this video so that others can see it, and it'll definitely help the channel grow. Stay tuned for my up and coming videos. We're going to be talking about some more things relative to Python. And then, we're going to, as I stated before in the previous video, we're going to do a project. Okay, so thank you all for tuning in, and see you next time.